master the business of speaking with your hosts, Taylor and Austin. You're listening to Technically Speaking.
Welcome to another episode of Technically Speaking. Now, we are really excited about today's guest, Jason Eatmon, right from Salesgravy. Jason, my friend, welcome to the show.
I am so glad to hear that you are so excited because I am also so excited.
So guys, Jason is a Nebraska native, which is where his work ethic and sense of community was born. In '92, he joined an exclusive program within the U.S. Navy to serve as a nuclear mechanical engineer. There, he quickly became responsible for the training and certifications of hundreds of nuclear personnel, optimization of drills and training, and the creation of specialized curriculum and associated rubrics. It was here that his patriotism, constitution, and passion for optimism were born. After his service to his country, he changed career paths and secured a position responsible for training adults on new technologies to establish proficiencies before re-entering the workforce. Jason developed many courses to expand the organization's offerings and created a significant demand previously unseen for training services. This is where his passion for technology, instruction, coaching, and helping people transform was born. In '09, Jason started a company that was exclusively focused on integrating advanced networking technologies into schools. And within 10 years, the company's growth earned Inc.'s 5,000th acknowledgement 4 different times. This hypergrowth was born within a groundbreaking approach to business operations, which included creating original programs for recruiting, hiring, onboarding, training, operations, execution, biz dev, and sales. In an effort to be meaningful and impactful to his clients, he transformed his company into an organization that delivered business outcomes. Jason will attest that this journey was arduous, but hopefully fulfilling. And Jason led the company to be recognized as Partner of the Year for major manufacturers such as Cisco. It's also earned him the distinguished position on the Tech Giants Advisory Council. Now, throughout his company's growth, Jason became recognized as an inspirational thought leader in the industry and community for leadership, economic growth, and innovative strategies. And during this time, he trained thousands of professionals, facilitated hundreds of clinics, and frequently served as a featured speaker at trade shows and vertical events. Now, Jason's style as a speaker and trainer ranges from casual and direct to no-holds-barred inspirational. He's known for telling it like it is and ensures that he connects with everyone in the audience. Using his experience in building successful business combined with sincere passion to help others master their obstacles and fears, Jason delivers an experience that is sure to usher the change in any organization. He was hand-selected by Jeb Blount to serve as the Salesgravy's chief sales officer and also plays an instrumental role in serving the business and training needs of strategic customers. Jeb and Jason are also co-authoring BOSS, Business Outcome Selling Strategies, which is set for an early 2021 release. Wow, Jason. Quite a decorated background. How did you find yourself going into Salesgravy? Tell us all about your background.
Well, first of all, I need to have you hang out with me because the way you introduced me was pretty epic.
Thank you.
I love that. Thank you. I actually forgot that I had done a lot of those things, and so it's nice to hear every once in a while. So I appreciate that introduction. How I met Jeb was awesome. I mean, I actually had to, I was tasked with growing the company. You know, it was a tech company that we started in 2009 in the last recession, and we needed to make the company become bigger than we could make it ourselves. And so we had to go build this business development side, and we'd never done that. And I looked out to my traditional competitors and found out that I wasn't really inspired by the way they were doing it. It just wasn't, it was a 2% business. And when I had such a small focus in the marketplace, so I was selling specifically into K-12, into the school districts, and just in California, well, if I only got 2% of that business, I'd be out of business. So I had to figure out how to make it better. And so I picked up some books. I think one of them was like The Art of Cold Calling or something. I don't even remember what that book was, but I grabbed Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blount. And I read that, and it really kind of resonated with my soul at that time, right? It really spoke to me. And what was awesome is I learned about myself. And what I mean by that is there was things that I just couldn't figure out how to go recreate my success as we brought new salespeople on. And what Jeb did in that book was fantastic because he really broke down into the basic elements, the things that make ultra high performers. And so when I was able to read that book, I could identify with the different pieces that holistically made me good at sales. And so he really helped me identify the things that I could use to build a business development program, which we did, and we produced amazing results. And like I said, now the evidence is now in history. We were on Inc. 5000's fastest growing companies in the United States 4 out of 5 years. And that was without trying. The goal wasn't to be on that list. The goal was to build the company. So it was pretty flattering to get recognized like that. But, other than reading the book, I was inspired to meet this guy, right? I wanted to meet Jeb. There was a handful of questions. Well, one in particular, one question I really wanted to ask him face to face. And so we hired him. We decided to hire him. And he came in and he spent 2 days with my team. It was awesome. And we just hit it off. We became friends. And when I sold my shares in that tech company, he said, "Hey, come be my chief sales officer." And here I am.
Wow. What an incredible backstory. What was it like building that business development process from scratch? I mean, what did you learn throughout all of that? And what do you think made you so successful? Because I would love to, say that, Jason, you could attribute all of that success to that book, which I'm sure there's a portion of it that came from, but a lot of it was you. What do you think worked for you? What clicked with that program, that business development program?
Well, so the first thing was just it was the refusal to accept mediocre. And what I mean by that is when I went out and looked at our traditional competitors, what were they doing? I talked to my manufacturers. Hey, how are people building business? What are they doing? And are they prospecting? Are they just sitting around waiting for leads? And the answers weren't compelling. They weren't compelling at all. And so whatever I had to create, it had to come from scratch. I couldn't go buy a Just Add Water business development program.
Correct. Yeah.
The first thing was acknowledging that mediocre was not acceptable, and that this 2% business, which cold calling is a 2% business, it was also unacceptable. So, you mentioned the book. Yeah, it wasn't just that book. It was partly me too, but I was inspired by books like Simon Sinek's Start With Why. That was a huge influence. And speaking of influence, one of the most amazing books I've ever read was the book by Dr. Robert Cialdini, Influence, which, by the way, that was the one question I wanted to ask Jeb, because it was very clear to me that he was also inspired by Dr. Cialdini. And when I got to ask him that question, sure enough, Dr. Cialdini was a huge influence on his frameworks, which made me love his writing even more. So, we took all that together. We assembled a plan that leveraged some of these frameworks and strategies, tactics, and ideas presented in some of these great books, and we just started hitting the pavement with it, and it was working. We produced results that were, quite frankly, unprecedented as compared to other companies our size. We didn't really know what we were doing at first, but we knew that we needed to step back at least weekly and optimize. We did some things on a daily too that were amazing. Like I forced everyone to take breaks, at least 2 15-minute breaks in the morning and 2 15-minute breaks in the afternoon. And they had to go take breaks together, walk around to get off the phone, shake out the things, and quite frankly, just talk about what they've learned, what sucked, what was awesome. And they got better. Like we evolved at the same pace. That was, I think, the most amazing achievement, is that all of the business development reps, they evolved at the same pace. And I think it was not because of the work we did or the training we did. It was because of the breaks we made them take and what we made them talk about during the breaks. It was cool.
Wow.
I'm curious, it sounds like culture had a big part to play in this, which totally makes sense to me. And it makes me think back to the root reason why you had to go that route. Do you think that the reason that you had to build from the ground up was because the competitors that you mentioned had just intrinsically broken systems? Or do you think that it was sort of an evolution in the market in terms of how the buyers saw things that brought this to light?
That's such a cool way to ask that question. It's a cool way, and it's I appreciate you asking it like that. But honestly, what I found was everyone's too much of a chicken shit to pick up the phone.
That's exactly right.
I mean, honestly, that's what it was. I mean, people relied heavily on these social networking events. They relied heavily on being friends with the sales rep of the manufacturer to get those extra leads. They relied heavily on referrals. Now, none of those things are bad, but it's not scalable. Like, if I really want to grow the business, I need to go get most of it. I can't rely on charm. And for business owners out there that are listening to this, if you're relying on relationships and charm of your sellers, you are in deep shit when they leave. Your system and process has to be the thing that makes your company attractive. Your sales process has to be a compelling part of the business outcomes that you deliver. And if they're disassociated and you rely heavily on the charm and relationships of individual sellers, you're in trouble. And you're likely seeing results like 80% of your number comes from 20% of your reps. I'm sick and tired of that. I don't know why we accept that. That does not have to be a truth that we accept. And it's always the case where it's usually relationship sellers. They don't have a good sales process. They're relying on charm and traditional ways, these conventional referral ways of getting business. And most people are afraid to pick up the dang phone.
Yeah, it's funny too,
so
when like they're
that's
afraid
huge.
when they're afraid to pick up the phone too. Like, I don't know about you, but like more often than not, we train a speaker individually to go and pick up the phone, manage a sales process and so on. And I'm sure you've seen this in sales teams and sales reps and so on. But one of the things we see is like when they pick up the phone, they realize, wow, this isn't that bad. And wait a second, they actually wanted to hear from me in the first place. Like, what? Why such a disconnect from that? Why do you think we've gone so far away from wanting to pick up the phone?
Well, check this out. My favorite sales class that I ever took ever in my life wasn't really about sales. Now, trust me, I'm not going to make it weird right now, but let me tell you a funny story.
Okay.
I really have a lot of respect for our military. Being a recruiter is one of two of the hardest sales. Because if you think about it, most of us listening to this have the luxury of disassociating ourselves from what we actually sell. If I sell software and somebody doesn't want it, I don't have to take that personal. But when I'm a recruiter and I have to go sell an idea that I chose, that is harder. That's more personal. So when someone says, oh, that would suck, I would never join the military, that's just for stupid people, that would hurt me because it's personal.
Sure.
Okay? Now, the same thing goes for religion. So one of the things that I did one time is I saw this class on discipleship, selling the idea of, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a sales course. I'm fascinated by how people sell that idea, right? And so I went and I saw something unbelievably life-changing. Okay, now I've told you this isn't going to get weird. We're going to keep it in sales, so just stick with me for a second. Everyone that was there for the same reasons. They wanted to be able to feel more secure about talking about the idea of their faith, selling the idea of their faith, okay? There's nothing wrong with that, okay? There's no judgment there. That's what they were there for. However, before the thing started, complete strangers were talking to each other. They were movies that they watched, restaurants they've tried, magazine articles that they've read, places that they went on vacation. They were selling the ideas to complete strangers with passion and conviction. Wait, time out. What's the actual problem then? Clearly you don't have the ability, you don't have any fear talking to a stranger. What is it? And so I left there and I was fueled. I only went to that first session. It was great. But that observation really changed and inspired me to go study, why do people share things? So when I did my research, what I found out is there's two fundamental prerequisites to share something with a complete stranger. Number one, you must believe what you're saying is true. So I tell people all the time, if you don't think the product does what you think it's going to do, I cannot help you. Find a different job. People are like, what, really? Yeah, if you don't believe in what you're selling, leave. It sucks. I can't teach you magic cantrips and spells to use, okay? You got to believe in it. The second thing is you have to believe that by telling someone that, it's going to impact them in a positive way. Now, look at a doctor, a cancer doctor. I mean, geez, Jason, now you're getting morbid. But seriously, you get a cancer doctor, does a bunch of tests, finds out that, ooh, I got some bad news. But he still has to share that with you. He has to call you, make that uncomfortable phone call, and share it with you. And thank God for people like that. Thank God that doctors aren't as afraid as salespeople for picking up the phone. Because they tell us something because they know it's true, and they tell us because by sharing that with us, it can affect our lives in a positive way. We have to believe in what we sell, and if you don't, get a different job. But assuming that's not the problem, you have to truly believe that by providing people with that information, it's going to affect them in a positive way. Because let's face it, we are professional interrupters. We interrupt people. There's not a single time I've ever called a prospect where they said, oh my gosh, Jason, I'm so glad you called because I was sitting around wondering where to spend money. No, that has never happened. We are professional interrupters. And to make matters worse, we are interrupting people, complete strangers, with the audacity of insinuating that our idea is better than what they have.
That's right. Yeah.
So if you don't believe that that's true, how in the hell could you ever get on board? I'm saying if you're not fired up and passionate about the things that you do for your company and your community and the people that you serve, then I don't know what to tell you. Sales is a passion game, man. So
that makes sense to me. It reminds me of like one of the most cliche terms in sales training a lot of the time. But yeah, like I think that if you don't 100% stand behind something, then you can't ever possibly share that with somebody. And if there's an element of you that feels like you aren't truly going to deliver the value that they need, then like, who cares? You've got to care more than they care. And you've got to like help, transfer that excitement to them so that they are as amped up as you are, and if not, then why bother, And I'm curious, like you've taught, trained so many salespeople. Is this something that like, can you take somebody that doesn't believe in the value behind what they're selling and turn them into somebody that believes in that value? Or like, because I think like a lot of times you hear about like in small businesses, CEOs, right? And they've been selling forever and they keep selling. And in order for the business to scale, they need to be able to place their efforts into leadership. But if they can't let go, then they can never scale. And I think some of that hesitation comes from feeling like somebody else can't communicate the value the way that the CEO can. So is it possible to take somebody that may be unfamiliar with what you do and help them get that firm belief in the value that you provide? Does that make sense?
Yeah, man, I think that's a super, super cool question. And there's so many different ways to answer it. I think systemically, if there's a problem with sellers not believing in what they sell, you're doomed. I mean, you can't polish a turd. So let's just leave that out of it. Let's assume that the solution does have a market and it is worthy of selling. So let's just throw away bad ideas, okay?
Sure.
One of the things that I see happen so often is that transition where the leadership or ownership steps out of the sales role and into the strategic role, and they have to go figure out how to scale themselves. I see that problem all the time, even with companies that are hundreds of people in size. I still see where the owner's trying to create a bunch of mini-me's. The problem with that is that nobody else is going to have the same skin in the game. They're not going to have the authority to make on-the-fly commitments. They aren't going to have the intrinsic association and spiritual connection with the product because they weren't there at the inception. They weren't there at the idea creation. There's just a lot of things missing. And so I see this happen a lot where ownership is frustrated, especially with the first, second, third wave of sellers that they hire, because they don't get it. But the problem is always onboarding. It's like most onboarding programs for sales teams really, really suck. And I'm saying that with love. Like I would say it to anyone's face in a warm embrace, and I would give you some suggestions. But the thing is like most onboarding things suck, and the reason why they suck is because the ownership hasn't figured out how to break down the elements of things that made them successful. Do you know why I know I'm an expert in this? Because I just described my first go at it. Yeah. I suck. I couldn't figure out how to go hire mini-me's. And I realized I'm never going to find them. They're unicorns. They don't exist. And you don't want to have unicorns. You don't want to find a bunch of mini-me's because they end up leaving and going and starting another company. You want to go find You may find that to do the job that you did, it takes 3 different people. That's what I found out. I needed a pre-sales person. I needed a pre-sales engineer. I needed a contracts person, and I needed a salesperson. I needed 3 people to backfill me. But then it becomes modular, and then you can onboard for a specific task. How do you onboard if your plan is to hire unicorns?
Yeah, you can't. It relies too much on the individual.
Yep.
No, they can't. You know, most people's onboarding is, hey, go hang out with Joe for a couple weeks and learn how to sell. What?
Doesn't really work out that well. It's something we see time and time again too. I mean, especially in the thought leadership space, because when people start out, they're solopreneurs. They're trying to sell their speaking or their consulting or their coaching, and one of the things we hear all the time is like, "Oh, I'm just going to get a VA, and then they're going to be able to book gigs for me." And it's like, "Oh, well, VA is a very broad term. Or, I mean, are you hiring that person for business development? Are you going to have them close? Are you going to have them research? Like, what are you going to actually have them do?" And then naturally what happens is we see this extremely high turnover rate in our industry simply because everyone thinks of VA as a magic wand to solve their business problems when they're not giving them a direction to head. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have people who are afraid to hire people, even though that they're a bottleneck. They're not generating the amount of revenue that they want to generate. And even if they do sell themselves successfully, usually we hear, well, no one can sell me like I can sell me. So how am I supposed to train somebody to do that? How would you answer that question?
Well, there's a couple questions in sales that are hard to answer, and that's one of them. But it really boils down to, I think a lot of people go hire something. They go hire entire departments full of people to compensate for the fact that they hired the wrong people elsewhere. Mm-hmm. That is when it won't work. That is when it's wrong. If you, like, I cannot tell you, they have account execs, and then they have inside people, and then they have BDRs. What the hell? Who is it? Because what happens is the inside people, the account execs don't prospect, so their inside people are kind of expected to. But when they get busy doing administrative work and backing up the AE and taking care of existing accounts, getting quotes out the door, working on proposals, etc., getting contracts in place, blah, blah, blah. Now all of a sudden we've conveniently displaced substantial, impactful work like prospecting, and all of a sudden we have to hire BDRs. Well, wait, time out. So who's actually responsible for prospecting? Well, the answer is everybody should be. Everybody should prospect. Like if you have a business that can survive solely on inbound, dude, sweet.
Sure. Yeah, right. Sure. I want that.
Like there's some, like, look at some of the companies like Zoom. They could care less about how to prospect. Like, they're getting crazy business right now. They don't have time to go deal with outbound. They're dealing with inbound all day long, and it's good for them. That's going to change one day, and the roller coaster is going to bottom out. But the fact is like, most of the time, I find that people are hiring complete groups of people based on the fact that the other people aren't actually doing what's in their essential job functions. If you hire a salesperson that can't prospect, fire them. And it all boils down to this. The biggest problem we have in sales is leadership sucks. Sales leadership sucks. That would never happen if we hold people accountable and hire the right people in the first place. But so we continue to just hire. I've met companies that have 300 people in sales, but they're producing about the same volume as a company with 100 people in sales, because they've diluted the entire thing to such ridiculous levels because they continue to hire people to compensate for the fact that other people aren't doing their job. It's crazy, but it happens all the time. I don't know if you guys see that.
For sure. Right people, right seat. That matters a lot. And I'm curious too, because I think that you were just talking about some of the definitions of the different roles that are involved in the sales process. And I think there's a lot of debate, right? I mean, people call different title or different roles, different titles. Sometimes it's the same role with different titles. And I think that at times there's so much noise out there about the different like functions that need to be taken into consideration when you're building a sales process, that things get missed and kind of looked over. And when we talk about sales, like in the most I don't know, distilled way that we can, I guess, we tend to split it up into two different components. On one side, we call it the business development side of things, where you're working on finding leads, nurturing leads, creating relationships, and then ultimately handing interested parties to sales development, the other side of the coin, where you take interested parties and work them towards a close. Now, I think that we probably share some ideas about whether or not that's the right way to define those two different components of a sales process. But I know a minute ago you mentioned that when you were either talking about yourself or somebody you worked with, that one role that you were filling as the owner needed to get split into three different roles that could be accomplished separately. So based on what I just said, does that align with your philosophy about sales? Am I missing an important role here? Are there better ways to define the different elements of a standardized sales process?
So I have the luxury of working with a whole bunch of different companies, people that sell asphalt roads to counties and cities, people who sell complex multi-million-dollar software subscriptions to gigantic Fortune 50 companies, and everything in between. And I will say this, the only universal constant between what roles are needed is the fact that there has to be someone prospecting. There has to be someone selling. There has to be someone doing account management, because that's where your referenceability lives and your ability to take care of the account. And we have creative terms now, customer success and customer experience, all that stuff. And that's great. It could be one person, it could be two people, it could be five people. The more people is more complicated. Although it's more scalable, it's more complicated. And so the thing I will say is this: the perfect system, even the most perfect system, requires constant governance and nurturing. And that is where leadership is. So it doesn't matter whether there's one person in charge of the entire sales journey, from qualifying to targeting prospect, qualifying, initial meetings, sales process, and post delivery account management. If there's one person, two people, three people, four people, I will say this: in the absence of very well-defined daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly management, there is no right answer. In the absence of leadership, there's no good answer. There's only hope. And that is not a strategy.
Yeah.
Man, that turned that question on its head. I was not expecting that response, and that was a great response.
Yeah. I think one of the things I hear all the time from people is, yeah, I just want this system that works. And then once it works, I just want to set it and forget it. What do you have to say to those people, Jason?
Well, okay, so if they're a nerd like me and they have an engineering background, I'll ask them if they know what a Carnot engine is. And if they say yes, then that'll be really cool, because they don't exist. A Carnot engine produces just enough energy to go feed itself to run perpetually. I hear people say things that are really asinine too. They're really inane, like, well, here at this company, we're moving so fast that we need to be able to change the tires on the race car while we're driving. Look, the reason why you've never seen anybody do that in NASCAR is it doesn't freaking work.
That's right.
Like, you can't actually do that. There's this concept of slowing down to speed up that we have to embrace. So, for me, I often see, I really do believe in that old adage: there's no such thing as a bad team, just bad leaders. Mm-hmm. Because it blows my mind sometimes when I see leadership sitting around complaining about salespeople that you hired.
That's right. And don't manage.
There is a daily, what are you doing to manage this daily? You have to feed this machine daily. You have to, there's not a single thing in life that's perpetual. Nothing. Why would you want a system? Basically, it's the same thing that I told you before. They are compensating for something that is failing, and it could be themselves. Man, I tell you what, small companies, and if you have some people listening that are in small companies in your leadership, it's okay, man. You fire yourself. I fired myself 3 different times from jobs because as the company scaled, I wasn't the right person anymore. Mm-hmm. Put your pride aside and go do something else for the company and backfill yourself with someone amazing. That should be your goal. It should be amazing. My goal at one point was, hey, I want to be so worthless, I'm just cleaning toilets. I'm cool with that. I want to, because then I'm making tons of money, right?
Sure. That's right.
Sure. Yeah. You'd be the best paid toilet cleaner in the whole world, but
yeah, absolutely. Well, why not? I wanted my job to be running around, make sure everyone had coffee. Need a back rub? Cool, I'll throw that in. Yeah. That's all I wanted to do because, quite frankly, if you surround yourself with great people and you have a great system that has a great daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually nurturing plan, you're going to be okay. But people just want to like put gas in the car and let it run around the racetrack and not stop to fill it up, not change the tires, not change the oil, not check the gauges. Like, you can't give me a single example in life of that.
Where do you think that mindset comes from?
Honestly,
Yeah.
almost without exception, I think it comes from the delusion that everybody thinks like the owner.
Mm-hmm.
I think it comes from the delusion that everybody is operating at the same capacity as some of the founders or owners of a company, and they are compensating for. Some people are afraid to be exposed that they're not actually good leaders. They started the company, but one of the most terrifying things that happens to any business owner in their life is that day when they wake up and they can't figure out what's gnawing at their soul, but it's the acknowledgement that the company needs to get bigger than they are. That is terrifying.
Yeah.
But those people, those of us that embrace that and accept that challenge and just surround yourself with good people you can trust that understand the vision, then you'll be okay. But along the way, you got to fire yourself.
Yeah. We talk all the time about like making data-driven decisions too. And as I've been listening to you, it sounds like there's really not a secret formula to making sales work. A lot of what you're talking about is consistency and iteration and documentation and clear processes. And am I right about that?
There's not one size fits all. There's not a just add water. There's not a powdered sales process where I just show up, add some beer, or add some water, and we're good. Like, that doesn't exist. I will say that there is a formula for your company, but most of the time, here's the deal. Let's just take sales prospecting, sales just by itself, okay? By the way, every single solitary person in your company should throw off daily, weekly, and monthly metrics that go towards their essential job functions. If they can't, you have a lot of work to do. Okay, so step away from that comment and let's move into sales. From a sales basis, on a daily basis, it's how many calls you make, how many emails you send, and how many other prospecting activities, LinkedIn, et cetera, whatever that is. Vidyard, I don't care what it is, but how many of those? That's daily. On the weekly, it's how many appointments did you set? Okay, on the monthly, it's how many appointments did you get and how are deals progressing? That's it. If you just do that, your quarters and years will turn out. I cannot believe that in 2020, I still walk into companies that should know better. I don't care what size they are. They've been in business long enough where they should know better, that are still surprised at quarterly results. They manage by quarter, or even worse, manage by year. Oh. Wait, you're surprised they missed their number? You haven't managed them once. You don't check in with them daily. You don't look at daily activity. You don't work at weekly activity. You just ask them for pipeline reports, and you're totally okay with them kicking the cans down the road, putting a bunch of deals installed stuck, whether relegated down to just checking in. Might it be possible that if you looked at them just a few days in a row, you might have seen a trend that would manifest itself into missing their quarterly number? Hell yes, you would have, 100% of the time. That's what's so insane. I cannot believe it's 2020 and we do not have managers, sales leaders that are checking every single day on prospecting.
Especially when it's never been easier.
And they have the audacity to complain about numbers. It's mind-boggling.
And the technology gives you those numbers. If you're using a CRM worth its salt, it'll straight up tell you what your reps' performance are. You can look at a dashboard for 5 minutes flat and know exactly what that person's been doing all day, all week, all month, all quarter, all year. I mean, it just expands ever outwards and you don't have to calculate anything. And I wonder, like, from your seat, do you find that people don't look at these numbers because they feel like the barrier of entry to discover what those numbers are is too high? Like, is it that they don't have the tools and resources, or is it a lack of education?
I think that There's a couple problems here. There's a systemic problem, and this is something else I can't believe that we are so evolved as a profession, but we still see the best sellers being made into a manager.
Mm-hmm.
It's a totally different set of
Not
muscles.
the right seat. Yeah.
Man, totally not the right seat. Because the ownership doesn't have any idea, because a lot of them weren't sellers. They were like the engineering side of the business, or they were the technical side of the business. And they don't have any idea, really. They sold a totally different way through Rotary clubs and stuff like that when they first built. But now that we have to build this machine that's scalable, they take their best seller and make them the manager with the hope that whatever made them successful, they could teach other people. But it's a different skill set. The best sellers very rarely make good managers. It's insane. That's a huge problem.
Yeah.
Another problem is there's a natural thing that humans have where we don't like asking people to do things that we wouldn't do ourselves. So we don't ask people to prospect because, oh my God, if I did, what if they asked me to make cold calls? What if they asked me to teach them? What if they asked me to show them how to do it? I'd look like a fool because I didn't sell like that. But if you want a scalable business, you got to have people prospecting every single solitary stinking day.
There you have it, folks. You hear that? Prospecting every day. We're not crazy here. We got Jason Eatmon at Salesgravy to give us a sauce on what you need to be doing daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly. I have one last question for you, Jason, and this largely applies to a lot of our listeners as professional speakers, thought leaders running very small teams and largely unpredictable revenue, which is what we help people solve, generally speaking. What can speakers, thought leaders, just anybody who's listening, you don't even need to be a speaker or thought leader to get value out of this question. How do you overcome that fear of selling? What can people do to start overcoming the fear of reaching out and prospecting and going through the grind of iteration, going through the grind of setting up the CRM and getting the metrics? What can people do to overcome those fears and take action right now to transforming their revenue and their business?
Well, that's such a great question, and I wish we had a ton of time, but I mean, let's just take the number one thing, the number one reason why people are afraid to pick up the phone, for example, okay? Let's just start there. The number one reason why people are afraid to pick up the phone and call people that don't know them, to interrupt them, to go expose themselves to potential ridicule, objection, and rejection is because they don't have any idea how to deal with objections. Mm-hmm. Because let's take that recruiter example again. Somebody says, I'm not a baby killer. They hear that all the time, you guys. I train recruiters and they hear that. Like, that hurts.
Yeah.
Like, how do you deal with that? And the secret is, if you read Jeb's book, Objections, you'll learn that there's three things. Mindset, like, get over it. It's fight or flight response. Get over it. It's an automated thing. You just need to anticipate the fact that you will feel triggered, feel afraid. You want to fight, or freeze, all of which are bad on a prospecting call, and there's ways to control that. The second thing is all objections can be anticipated. All objections can be anticipated. Don't believe me? I guarantee I could take all your listeners right now. I don't care what they sell, who they sell to, and I will write 10 down, and I guarantee I'll nail 80% of their objections. 80%. How could I possibly do that? Because they're all the same, guys.
They're all the same.
Oh, we're too busy right now. Hey, you're not talking to the right person. Hey, we tried that before. It didn't work out so good.
Don't have the money.
Competitor. Dude, it's all the same. And if that's true, if what I just said is true, imagine this. If I was going to go into the ring and fight an opponent that only had one offensive move, might I practice the defense against that one move? Sure. And that's one move. Let's get crazy, right? Okay. Let's double it to two. What if they have a right hook and a left knee? Might you practice the defense for those two and then turn around and figure out an offensive attack? Well, yes, of course. Oh my gosh. What about 4? What about 8 moves? Oh my God, now we're getting insane, right? So could you learn 8 moves as a sales professional, as an elite athlete of the business world? You're telling me you can't learn 8 things? Because there's not more than 8, guys. There's not more than 8. There's 8 or less, guarantee it. And if I wrote them all down, and I can anticipate them and use a framework like Jeb suggests in the book of ledge, disrupt, and ask, which is basically one of the same things that you learn in special forces on how to mentally get back into executive control of your brain and not let fight or flight kick in. Like, you'll rock it. And so, yeah, objections is one of the biggest things that I would focus on to get people to pick up the phone. And the second thing is management. You set the expectation. How do we do today? And every day you check. And every day you say, hey, what's up? Or every day, hey, good job. And you start with quantitative. And as the quantitative starts to kind of become a culture, then you can start focus on qualitative analysis. That's a secret, man.
I'm so glad you talked about objections there right at the end. And I think Austin and I would agree fully. I mean, if you have the passion, like let's round this episode out. You have the passion, you have the conviction, you understand you're interrupting people, but you have the ability to overcome all of their objections and have all the defensive moves to their offense. What else is there to the successful sales process? And of course, we're going to account for management and keeping track of daily, weekly, monthly. That's what it takes, but it takes that constant iteration, that constant in your life. It's not something that you can just set and forget like a perpetual motion machine. So thank you so much for sharing all that, Jason. Now, as you know, try it one more time. As you know, we're all about creating value for our audience. So now at Salesgravy, what are some of the things that you're working on that our listeners can benefit from?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I mean, we do courses all the time. We do a lot of private and public courses on objections, sales negotiation. We have one of the most amazing sales negotiation courses ever, based on Jeb's book, Inked. We do a lot of fanatical prospecting, but I'll tell you right now, it's virtual selling. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, okay, I am really good at Zoom and blah, blah, blah. But it's so funny when everybody that takes these courses, the ones from me or anyone else, when they take these courses, their eyes are this big because they realize they know jack shit about virtual selling. And so, because there's a whole new mentality, it's not just your dynamic charm on Zoom. That's not what virtual selling is. There's a whole bunch of stuff to it. And now when you add work from home to it, it's even worse. Part of your virtual selling package needs to be a sign you religiously hang on the doorbell that says, do not ring this doorbell. You know, because I'm telling you, as we evolve into this new virtual world and people are getting it's less acceptable for the kids to run in front of the camera and the dogs to bark in the background. That's one thing. The other thing too is when the entire world has been relegated to the same virtual stage, how will you differentiate? Look, when we could show up in the car and, show up on our car and take people out to lunch and be charming and be fun and take them out to dinner, that was cool. But now that we're on the same virtual stage, how are you different than anyone else? It's so funny, man. When I ask people, hey, who's your competitor? It's a trick question because they start listing off all these companies. I said, stop, you're wrong. In the context of prospecting, everybody is your competition. Mm-hmm. I don't care what you sell. You could sell software, hardware, good ideas, or gym memberships. I don't care what you sell. Every single solitary person that wants that same prospect's attention and time is your competition. And they're all calling, and they're all emailing, and they're all doing a crappy job of it. So now is the time to embrace virtual selling, embrace video messaging, embrace it and do it well. Good lighting, good background, good microphones. No more. This is not a freaking pickup game, guys. Sales is not a pickup game. It's not okay. We have to get ahead and stay ahead. We have to accelerate. We have to use amazing tools and be good at it. And we have to be better than everybody. So that's the thing we've been focusing on a lot lately. We literally will launch a virtual selling class, and less than 4 hours later, the thing is full.
Nice.
It's amazing.
Get it while it's hot, folks.
That's right. We'll make sure there are links in the show notes, but I just want to put a little note to tidy this episode up. The thing Jason just said about virtual selling as professional speakers and thought leaders is crucial. This is the time to differentiate yourself. This is the time to show your decision makers what you're capable of, since they will be hiring you for virtual speaking events and working with their team virtually. Take the time and the care to make sure your studio is set up properly when you're having these conversations, and those micro improvements in comparison to what everyone else is doing is going to set you apart from the rest. So as always, we hope you got tremendous value out of this. If you did, hit that subscribe button, rate it, and don't forget to check out the show notes below. And if you want more awesome resources like this, go to speakerflow.com/resources. Thank you so much for chiming in. I just wanted to take a second to thank our sponsor, Auxbus. Auxbus is the all-in-one suite of tools you need to run your podcast. And it's actually what we run here at SpeakerFlow for Technically Speaking. It makes planning podcasts simple. It makes recording podcasts simple. It even makes publishing podcasts to the masses simple. And quite honestly, Technically Speaking wouldn't be up as soon as it is without Auxbus. Thank you so much, Auxbus. And if you are interested in checking Auxbus out, whether you're starting a podcast or you have one currently, get our special offer, auxbus.com/speakerflow, or click the link below in our show notes.
Thanks for tuning in today. Check the show notes for more info and see you next time. Later.